Grandmother fell in love with the town priest. Now what? It all began with a simple glance during Mass, but it was enough to shake her faith and her destiny. Living a forbidden romance, she faced loneliness, pregnancy, and the silence of rejection. Years later, she tried one last chance at reconciliation and found only grief. Now she carries in secret the story of a love that could never be lived. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Will continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The bell of St. Clair's Church echoed through the air of Little Pinecrest Valley, announcing Sunday Mass. Emily Anderson adjusted the lace veil over her brown hair as she climbed the stone steps of the century-old church. At 23, she was considered the most obedient and devout of the Andersons, a family that carried the weight of their name and tradition as if they were family jewels. "Emily, straighten your posture. I've told you that proper young ladies don't walk hunched over," whispered Margaret, her mother, beside her, while greeting the local society ladies with restrained smiles. Emily nodded and straightened her shoulders. Her father, Richard Anderson, walked ahead with firm steps and head held high. Owner of the largest fabric store in the region, he was known for his rigidity in both business and in raising his 5 children. Emily, being the youngest, carried the weight of all expectations. The church was fuller than usual. Whispers ran. Through the polished wooden pews, Emily noticed something different in the air, beyond the smell of incense and freshly lit candles. "Today is the first Mass of the new parish priest," commented Sarah, her older sister, adjusting the rosary between her fingers. "They say he came from the capital, transferred at the bishop's request." Emily merely nodded, uninterested. Her life already had a well-established routine, working at her father's store in the morning, helping her mother with household chores in the afternoon, and attending prayer groups at night. On Sundays, Mass was the only social event allowed. This was how she was raised, this was how she would live. The murmuring ceased when the doors of the sacristy opened. Father Michael Sullivan walked to the altar with serene steps. Tall, with an athletic build disguised under priestly vestments, and with a gaze that seemed to see beyond appearances, he was not the typical elderly priest the town was accustomed to. Emily felt a strange warmth rise up her neck when, for a brief moment, during the homily, the priest's eyes met hers. There was something in that look, a depth, perhaps a pain, that made her look away, confused. "The path of virtue is not made only of privations, but of daily choices," the priest was saying, in a voice that blended authority and gentleness. "God does not ask us for perfection, but for honesty with ourselves and with others." Those words provoked a strange sensation in Emily, as if somehow he was speaking directly to her. After Mass, Richard Anderson made a point of introducing his family to the new parish priest. "These are my daughters, Sarah, already married, and Emily, the youngest," he introduced with contained pride. Emily is her mother's right hand in organizing parish charity events. Father Michael extended his hand to Emily, who felt her fingers tremble slightly as she touched him. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emily," he said, with a discreet smile. "I hope I can count on your help. I'm organizing a campaign to collect coats for winter." "Of course, Father," she replied with the firmest voice she could muster. "I'm at the parish's disposal." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, recalling every detail of that brief encounter. "It's just admiration," she told herself. "Admiration for his words, for the way he conducts Mass." Little did she know that, on the other side of town, in the small parish house, Father Michael also remained awake, trying to banish from his thoughts the pair of brown eyes that seemed to carry a silent sadness so similar to his own. The following weeks brought a new dynamic to Emily's routine. The coat drive gave her the opportunity to frequent the parish beyond Sundays. Every Tuesday and Thursday, after her shift at the store, she would go to the parish hall to organize donations. "You have a natural talent for organization," commented Father Michael, while observing Emily meticulously cataloging each received item. "You can see order where others would see only chaos. My father always says I'm too methodical," she replied with a shy smile. "At the store, I'm the one who organizes the inventory." Your father seems to be very proud of you. Emily hesitated before answering. He has expectations, that's not quite the same as pride. For the first time, someone seemed truly interested in hearing what she had to say, in seeing beyond the image of the perfect daughter everyone expected her to be. During afternoons at the parish, Emily discovered that the priest had studied literature before, seminary, shared her love for poetry, and carried a more complex life story than he let on. "Have you ever thought about studying, Emily?" he asked one afternoon, while they organized books donated for the church bazaar. "Study?" She laughed as if the idea were absurd. "Daddy says a woman needs to learn to manage a home, not a business." Sarah tried to convince him to let her study education, but he wouldn't allow it. "And what would you like to study, if you could?" The question caught Emily by surprise. No one had ever asked about her desires. "Maybe literature," she confessed, feeling her cheeks burn. "Or accounting. I like numbers too." Michael smiled, a smile that seemed to hold secrets. "It's never too late to dream, Emily." Those seemingly innocent conversations built a bridge between two lonely worlds. Emily began to anxiously await the workdays at the parish. At home, she found herself distracted during family prayers, with thoughts that made her blush. Margaret began to notice the changes in her daughter. "You've been very involved with this church work," she commented as they embroidered on the porch. "Your father is concerned that you're neglecting the store." "The coat drive was a success, Mom. We got more donations than expected," Emily defended herself, keeping her eyes fixed on the embroidery. "Harriet told me she saw you leaving the church yesterday alone with the priest." Emily felt her heart race. "We were just talking about books for the bazaar. Father Michael has very interesting ideas for the community." "Be careful with excessive admiration, my daughter," Margaret warned, with a voice that mixed concern and censure. "The new parish priest is very young, and you are an unmarried young woman. People talk." Emily swallowed hard, feeling a lump in her throat. Were her feelings so evident? The following week, during the organization of books in the parish library, Emily and Michael found themselves alone in a more secluded section. He was showing her a rare edition of poems when his fingers touched hers for longer than necessary. "I'm sorry," he murmured, stepping back. "There's nothing to apologize for," Emily replied with halting breath. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Michael took a step toward her, his eyes reflecting an internal conflict. "Emily, I should stay away," he said with a husky voice, "but I can't stop thinking about you." The world seemed to stop at that instant. Emily knew she should step back, say that it was wrong, ask to be transferred to another parish group. Instead, she felt herself moving forward, as if something greater than her will was guiding her. "I can't stop thinking about you either," she confessed, her voice almost inaudible. Their faces approached slowly, hesitantly. The first kiss was timid, laden with guilt and desire. When they pulled away, both knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. "This is madness," whispered Emily, touching her own lips, as if not recognizing the woman who had just acted on impulse. "I know," Michael replied, running, his hand through his hair in a gesture of anguish. "But for the first time in years, I feel truly alive." The abandoned old mill on the Silverman property became Emily and Michael's secret refuge. It was a colonial mansion that resisted time, hidden among palm trees and banana trees, far from the curious eyes of the town. There, between stone walls that held stories from other times, they built their own forbidden narrative. "We could leave," Michael suggested on a hot December afternoon as they watched the sun set through the cracks in the roof. "Start anew. Life somewhere else where nobody knows us." Emily rested her head on his chest, feeling his heart beat rapidly. "Would you leave the priesthood?" she asked with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "For you, Emily, I would face anything. I've already written to a friend in Chicago. He can help me get a job as a teacher." Those words were like a dream, a possibility of freedom that Emily had never imagined for herself. In the last 2 months, their meetings had become more frequent and intense. What had begun as conversations and glances had transformed into a love that consumed every thought, every breath. "My father would never accept it," she murmured. "He would consider it a dishonor to the family." Not all love needs approval to exist, Emily. Sometimes you have to choose between what others expect of us and what our heart truly desires. That night, upon returning home, Emily felt a sudden indisposition. She ran to the bathroom and vomited. In the days that followed, the discomfort persisted, accompanied by a fatigue that she tried to disguise. She began to mentally calculate the dates, feeling panic grow within her. She was late, very late. Sarah, already married and with 2 children, was the first to notice the signs. "You're pale, little sister," she commented during a Sunday lunch, "and you've barely touched your food." "It's just fatigue," Emily deflected. "The store has been busy with Christmas orders." But Sarah was not easily fooled. After lunch, she pulled her sister to a secluded corner of the garden. "Emily, you can trust me. I'm worried. These symptoms—" She hesitated, choosing her words. "Are you seeing someone?" The tears came without warning. Emily collapsed into her sister's arms, confessing her fears between sobs. "I need to be sure before I tell him," she concluded, wiping her face. "But I'm almost certain, Sarah. I'm expecting a child." Sarah paled, but maintained her composure. "Who is the father, Emily? Please tell me it's not who I'm thinking." Emily's silence was answer enough. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands. "Holy Mother of God, the priest? You and Father Michael? Emily, this is a sin, a shame, a scandal," Emily completed with bitterness in her voice. "I know all that, Sarah. I also know that I love him as I never thought I could love anyone." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "You need to talk to him. And soon, if you are indeed pregnant, you don't have much time to decide what to do." That same night, Emily sent a note to Michael through Peter, the sacristan who had become her unwitting accomplice. The note contained just one sentence: "We need to talk. It's urgent." The meeting was set for the next day at the abandoned mill. Emily arrived first, her heart pounding in her chest. When Michael appeared, she could see in his eyes that something was wrong. "You look worried," he said, touching her face gently. "What happened?" Emily took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she possessed. "Michael, I believe I'm expecting a child." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Michael staggered as if he had received a physical blow. Leaning on an old wooden column. "Are you sure?" he asked with a strangled voice. "Almost absolutely. All the signs are there." Michael ran his hands over his face in a gesture of despair. "My God, Emily, this changes everything." "We were already planning to leave, weren't we?" she said, trying to sound hopeful. "Now we have an even stronger reason." But his gaze had changed. There was fear there, a fear she had never seen before. "I need time to think, to organize everything. Please don't tell anyone for now. I promise. I'll find a solution." He hugged her tightly, but Emily felt a chill in her stomach. Something in his voice sounded different, distant. When they said goodbye, a dark premonition took hold of her. It was as if, somehow, she knew that would be their last meeting at the mill. A week passed with no news from Michael. Emily went to church every day, only to discover that the priest had gone away for a spiritual retreat, according to the substitute priest. In the parish, rumors were already starting. The young parish priest had departed abruptly, without goodbyes. "They say he requested a transfer," commented Harriet, the town's official gossip during a charity tea. "It seems he received a call to work in missions in the interior of Montana." Emily felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She kept her face impassive, but her world was crumbling inside. At night, in her room, she cried silently until dawn. The next morning, Peter, the sacristan, discreetly approached her as she left the store. "Miss Emily," he called, nervously looking from side to side. "I have something for you." He asked me to deliver it only after he left. It was a yellowed envelope containing a letter and some money. With trembling hands, Emily read the words that would change the course of her life. "Emily, when you read these words, I will already be far away. I have requested a transfer to an isolated community in the south of the country, where I will live in penance for the next few years. What we did was a mistake for which I will pay for the rest of my life. I cannot abandon my vows, my vocation. The money included should help you resolve our situation in the best way possible. Do not look for me. It's better this way for everyone. Maydi. God forgive you, as I hope he will one day forgive me. There was no signature, just a smudge that seemed to have been caused by a tear. Emily felt a wave of nausea and ran behind the store, where she vomited bitterly. The words "resolve our situation" echoed in her mind like a sentence. He expected her to get rid of the baby, as if it were just an inconvenience, a mistake to be corrected. That night she made a decision. She could not stay in Pinecrest Valley, facing the shame and scandal when her pregnancy became evident. She also could not do what Michael had implicitly suggested. That life growing inside her was innocent, was part of her, was her child. Emily sought out Sarah, the only person she trusted. "He's gone," she said with dry eyes, as if all tears had already been shed. "He left me this." Sarah read the letter and hugged her sister tightly. "What do you intend to do?" "I'm going to Aunt Eleanor's house in Rosewood Creek. I'll tell Mom and Dad that I got a better job there, and that Aunt Eleanor needs company. After that, I'll decide what to do." "But Rosewood is so far away, Emily, and Aunt Eleanor is a widow, lives alone in that isolated farmhouse. That's exactly why it's perfect. There, nobody knows me, nobody will know of my shame." Sarah hesitated, torn between loyalty to her sister and her duty as a daughter. "Dad will be furious when he finds out you left without his permission." "That's why I won't tell him. You will, after I'm already far away. Say that I was hired as a governess in the house of a friend of Aunt Eleanor, someone important. That will appease his pride." The plan was quickly put into action. Emily packed only the essentials, wrote a vague letter to her parents, and departed on the night train to Rosewood Creek. The 12-hour journey seemed endless, each jolt of the car amplifying her physical and emotional discomfort. Aunt Eleanor, a 60-year-old lady who held in her gaze the wisdom of someone who had seen everything in life, received her without asking questions. Her small farm with a wooden house surrounded by an abundant orchard became the refuge that Emily so needed. "The house isn't big, but it has an extra room that was Vincent's," said her aunt, leading her down the narrow hallway. "Since he left, 5 years ago, no one has used this space." Emily felt a pang of gratitude for her aunt's delicate choice of words. "Left" sounded much better than other, more definitive words. In the days that followed, Emily learned the routine of the farm, feeding the chickens at dawn, helping in the orchard during the morning, preparing preserves in the afternoon. The constant manual work helped keep her mind occupied, temporarily keeping away the pain of abandonment. At night, sitting on the porch while Aunt Eleanor knitted by the light of the lantern, Emily allowed herself to dream about the future. What would her child be like? Would they have Michael's eyes, his intelligence, his love for books, or would they be more like her, determined and resilient? "You'll be fine, girl," said Aunt Eleanor one night, as if reading her thoughts. "Women like us always find a way." Emily looked at her aunt with surprise. "How?" "You don't need to say anything. I was young once too. I made my mistakes. I loved those I shouldn't have. Life teaches, hurts, but it also heals. This child will be your strength, not your weakness." For the first time since receiving Michael's letter, Emily felt that perhaps, just maybe, she could find a path through that darkness. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the window of the small room, illuminating the sleeping face of the baby in the improvised crib. Matthew had turned 3 months old, and Emily still marveled at every detail of that small being: the tiny fingers that closed firmly around her thumb, the eyes that already showed a greenish-brown tone so similar to his father's, the smile that appeared during sleep. The birth had been difficult on a stormy night when Mrs. Geraldine, the region's midwife, arrived soaked at Aunt Eleanor's farm. There were hours of pain and fear, but when Emily finally held her son in her arms, she knew that every tear shed had been worth it. "He's beautiful," murmured Aunt Eleanor, moved. "He has the Anderson eyes." "And his father's chin," completed Emily in a low voice. Life on the farm had established a new routine. During the day, while Matthew slept, Emily helped Aunt Eleanor with the fruit preserves and embroidery they sold at the town fair. At night, she cradled her son, singing old lullabies that her own mother had taught her. Sarah was the first family member to visit them 3 months after Matthew's birth. She arrived laden with gifts and news from Pinecrest Valley. "Mom suspects something," she told while watching her nephew sleep. "She asks why you never come back to visit, why you always have an excuse for family gatherings." "What did you tell her?" asked Emily, feeling her heart tighten. "That you're very busy with your new job, that the lady you work for is demanding, but I don't think I completely convinced her." Emily sighed, looking out the window at the orchard that was beginning to bloom again. "Sooner or later they'll find out. I can't hide Matthew forever, nor do I want to." "Dad, we'll be furious," warned Sarah. "You know his temperament." "I know, but this is my son, Sarah. I'm not ashamed of him, just of the circumstances in which he was conceived." That night, after Sarah left, Emily made a decision. She couldn't live forever under Aunt Eleanor's protection, depending on her charity. Matthew deserved more. He deserved a mother who could provide him with a dignified future. The following week, Emily went to town with a definite purpose. In the small local shops, she offered her sewing and embroidery services. Her skill with the needle, honed during the months of seclusion, impressed the owner of the clothing store. "You have fairy hands, young lady," praised Mrs. Carman, examining a delicate flower embroidery. "I can order some dresses and tablecloths to start. If the work is good, I'll recommend you to my clients." It was the beginning of a new phase. Gradually, Emily's name began to circulate among the ladies of local society. Her personalized embroideries became coveted gifts, and soon she had more orders than she could handle alone. 6 months later, with carefully saved earnings, Emily rented a small house in the quieter part of town. It was a simple construction, with 2 bedrooms, a living room that she transformed into a workshop, and a yard where she planted roses and aromatic herbs. There, far from the past but carrying its consequences, she began to rebuild her life. Matthew grew strong and curious. At 18 months, he was already running around the yard, chasing butterflies and laughing with that pure joy that only children possess. Emily watched him, divided between unconditional love and fear for the future. What would she tell him when he asked about his father? What story would she create to fill the void that Michael had left? The answer came sooner than expected. One Sunday afternoon, while arranging old photographs, Matthew pointed to a newspaper portrait where a group of men appeared in military uniform. "Dada?" he asked in his childish voice. Emily felt her heart stop for an instant. She looked at the photograph and saw the opportunity that destiny offered her. "Yes, Matthew," she answered with a choked voice. "This was your father, a good and brave man who had to go away to a very distant place. The lie was born there, woven with threads of protection and love. Gradually, Emily built for her son the image of a heroic father, a young military man she had met during a brief passage through Pinecrest Valley who had loved her intensely, but who had been sent on a mission abroad before knowing about the pregnancy. A man who would never return, but who lived through the son he had left behind. "And why don't Grandma and Grandpa ever come to visit us?" asked Matthew one day, when he was already 4 years old. The innocent question reopened wounds that Emily thought were healed. "They live very far away, darling, and they're very busy." The lie weighed more and more, as did the absence of family. Despite the letters exchanged with Sarah, Emily missed her parents, her brothers, the family traditions that she once considered oppressive, but now recognized as part of her identity. It was then that destiny once again interfered in her life. On an ordinary morning, while helping Matthew get dressed for school, Emily heard knocks on the door. When she opened it, she found herself facing the aged, but still proud face of Margaret Anderson. "Mom?" Emily felt her voice fail as she observed the elegant figure of Margaret Anderson standing at her door. The years had left more silver strands in the hair of the Anderson family matriarch, but her posture remained impeccable, as if she carried the weight of family tradition in every inch of her straight spine. "Aren't you going to invite your mother in?" asked Margaret, with a voice that mixed authority and an unexpected softness. Emily took a step to the side, allowing her mother to enter. Matthew, hidden behind her, observed the unknown visitor with curiosity. "And this must be my grandson," said Margaret, bending slightly to be at eye level with the boy. "You're the spitting image of your grandfather when he was young." Emily felt the blood freeze in her veins. How had her mother found out? Who had told her about Matthew? "Sarah told me you were sick," continued Margaret, straightening up. "I came as soon as I could, despite your father's objections." "Sarah said I was sick," repeated Emily, confused. "It was the only way I found to come here without raising more suspicions," explained Sarah, appearing at the door that Emily had left ajar. "Forgive me the lie, but it was the only way." The three women sat in the small living room while Matthew played in the yard, observed through the window. The heavy silence was broken by Margaret. "So it's true. You have a son," she stated without beating around the bush. "Why did you hide this from us, Emily?" The question, although expected, still had the power to destabilize her. Emily took a deep breath before answering. "Because I feared everyone's reaction, especially Dad's. Your father is a man of rigid principles, it's true, but he's also a man who loves his children in his own way. He would have thrown me out of the house if he knew," argued Emily with bitterness in her voice. "Perhaps at first, yes," agreed Margaret, surprising her daughters with her frankness. "But time softens even the hardest hearts. Longing works. Miracles." Those words, so different from what Emily expected to hear, made the tears finally come. Years of absence, of kept secrets, of silent pain, everything overflowed in that moment. "Who is the father?" asked Margaret after a long silence. "Is it that military young man that Sarah mentioned?" Emily exchanged a quick look with her sister, who nodded discreetly. "Yes," she lied, feeling the weight of falsehood. He doesn't know about Matthew. He was transferred before I discovered the pregnancy." The lie was easier than the truth, safer. Margaret didn't need to know that her grandson was the fruit of a forbidden love with a priest. "And now? Do you intend to return to Pinecrest with us?" asked Margaret. The question caught Emily by surprise. "Return? But Dad—" "Your father doesn't need to know all the details at once. We'll say you're a widow, that your husband was a merchant who traveled a lot. With time, when he gets used to the idea of a grandson, maybe you can tell the complete truth. More lies, more secrets." Emily felt suffocated by the web she herself had woven. But what else could she do? "I have my life here now, Mom, my clients, my work. You can continue your work in Pinecrest. Your grandmother was the best embroiderer in the region, remember? It's a talent that runs in the family." That night, after Sarah and Margaret had settled in the guest room, Emily stayed awake, contemplating the moon through the window. The possibility of returning to her hometown, of reuniting with her family, was tempting. Matthew deserved to know his grandparents, his uncles, to grow up surrounded by the family warmth that she valued so much. But there was the risk. What if someone discovered the truth? What if, by some twist of fate, Michael returned to Pinecrest and found the son he didn't know existed? In the weeks that followed, Emily debated between the desire for reconciliation and the fear of judgment. Finally, she made her decision. She would close the house in Rosewood Creek, accept her mother's offer, but maintain her independence. She would rent a small house on the outskirts of Pinecrest, far enough to preserve her privacy, close enough for Matthew to be with the family. The return happened on an autumn afternoon. The town seemed smaller than in her memories, the streets narrower, the houses closer together. Or perhaps it was she who had grown beyond the limits of that place. Richard Anderson waited on the porch of the family home, his face an impenetrable mask. When the car stopped, Emily saw her father's eyes fix on Matthew, who slept in her lap, exhausted from the trip. "So this is my grandson," he said, with a voice that tried to sound neutral, but trembled slightly. "Yes, Dad, this is Matthew." Old Anderson observed the boy for a long moment. Then, without saying a word, he extended his arms. "Let me carry him. Children shouldn't sleep in cars, it's bad for the spine." That small gesture, so simple and at the same time so significant, was the first step in a reconciliation that Emily had never imagined possible. In the days that followed, she saw the grandfather, once so severe, melt with the smiles and questions of his grandson. She saw the uncles, initially suspicious, surrender to Matthew's natural charm. The story of the deceased husband was accepted without many questions. In a small town like Pinecrest, respect for others' pain sometimes overcame curiosity. Emily managed to establish herself as an embroiderer, renting a small space near her father's store, where she received orders from the same ladies who once judged her with stern looks. Life finally seemed to find a balance, until on an ordinary afternoon, while organizing her threads and fabrics, Emily heard the church bell announce the arrival of a new parish priest, a name that made her heart stop. Father Michael Sullivan. Time seemed to freeze at that instant. Emily dropped the spool of thread she was holding, watching it roll across the workshop floor as if in slow motion. Michael had returned. After almost 6 years, he was back in Pinecrest. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," commented Harriet, who was choosing threads for an embroidery. A ghost. That was exactly how Emily felt, haunted by a past that refused to stay buried. "I'm fine, just a little tired," she replied, bending down to pick up the spool. "The vicar, has he returned? For how long?" "They say it's permanent this time. The bishop sent him to replace Father Anselm, who's too ill to continue. It seems Father Michael spent the last few years in a monastery in the south, living almost like a hermit." Emily tried to maintain her composure, but her heart was beating so hard that she feared everyone around could hear it. Michael hadn't just returned for a visit. He was back to stay in Sue. The days that followed, Emily avoided the church and the main streets, sending Matthew to school with Sarah or with the maid. She invented excuses not to attend Sunday Mass, claiming excessive work, headaches, anything that would keep her away from those eyes that once knew every inch of her soul. Matthew, now almost 6 years old, didn't understand the sudden change in his mother's behavior. "Why can't we go to Mass, Mom?" he asked one Sunday morning. Grandpa said the new priest tells beautiful stories, that he talks about angels in a way that makes it seem like they're in the church. Emily felt a lump in her throat. Michael had always had a gift with words, an ability to make the divine almost palpable. It was one of the many qualities that had attracted her. "Mom is very busy right now, darling. Maybe next Sunday." But destiny, that relentless weaver, had other plans. On a rainy afternoon, while Emily worked on an especially complex embroidery for a bride's trousseau, the doorbell of the small house rang. Thinking it was the delivery of threads she had ordered, she opened the door without hesitation, and there he was, thinner with premature grey strands at his temples, deep circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, but still Michael, with the same green eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances. "Emily," he said with a hoarse voice, as if pronouncing that name required an immense physical effort. She wanted to close the door, run away, scream. Instead, she remained paralyzed, unable to react. "May I come in?" he asked. "Please, we need to talk." With a mechanical nod, Emily gave him passage. She mentally thanked that Matthew was at his grandfather's house that afternoon, protected from the storm that was about to break over her life. "Why did you come back?" she asked as soon as she closed the door without offering him a seat, without any pretense of hospitality. "I had no choice. The bishop determined my transfer. Believe me, when I learned I would be sent back to Pinecrest, I tried to refuse. But your vow of obedience spoke louder," she completed with a bitterness she didn't try to disguise, "just as it spoke louder than any promise you may have made to me in the past." Michael lowered his eyes, accepting the accusation as a deserved penance. "I know there are no words that can repair what I did, Emily. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I was a coward, selfish. I don't need your apologies now, Michael. 6 years have passed. 6 years. I'm no longer that naive young woman who believed in promises of eternal love." A heavy silence settled between them. Outside, the rain intensified, beating furiously against the windows, as if mirroring the emotional storm inside the small living room. "I heard you have a son," Michael finally said, with a trembling voice. "I heard you were widowed." Emily felt a wave of panic. Who had told him about Matthew, and worse, what exactly had they told? My personal life is none of your business, she replied, trying to buy time. You're right, it isn't, he agreed, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture that she still remembered so well. But I'd like to know, so the son, is he? The question hung in the air, incomplete but perfectly understandable. Emily felt the blood boil in her veins. How dare you? She exploded, losing the control she had maintained until then. You abandoned me pregnant, leave me to face everything alone, and now you come back 6 years later wanting to know if the child is yours. What would that change, Michael? What would you do if I said yes? He paled, grabbing the back of a chair to keep himself standing. Then it's true, he murmured, more to himself than to her. I have a son. No, Emily cut off firmly. I have a son I raised alone, who I fed, who I cradled on fever nights, who I taught to walk, to talk, to be a good and gentle boy despite everything. You have nothing, Michael. You gave up any right the moment you put your collar above us. The words hit Michael like stabs. He staggered, seeking support, his face a mask of pain and regret. Emily, please. I know I don't deserve it, but I ask for just one chance to meet him. Not as a father, I know I lost that right, but as a family friend, as the new parish priest. I don't want to disturb your lives. I just want what? To ease your conscience? To feel less guilty about your sins? Emily knew she was being cruel, but years of repressed pain finally found outlet. Each word was a release, each accusation a piece of her wounded soul seeking healing. Know that I built a life for the two of us, she continued. Matthew believes his father was a good man, a military man who left before even knowing of his existence. That's the story he knows. That's the truth that protects him. I understand, said Michael, after a long silence. I won't interfere. I only ask that you think about it. If one day you think it's time to tell the truth, I'll be here. When he finally left, Emily collapsed on the sofa, exhausted. The anger, the resentment, the pain, everything seemed to have been drained from her body, leaving only an immense void where before there were certainties. The months that followed were an exercise in balance for Emily. Avoiding Michael completely became impossible in a small town like Pinecrest. Inevitably, their paths crossed, in the central square at community events and, most painfully, at the Sunday masses that Matthew insisted on attending. I like Father Michael, the boy commented once as they returned from Mass. He taught me how to make a paper boat that really floats. Emily felt her heart tighten. Without her knowing, Michael had found ways to get closer to his son, small, seemingly innocent interactions that built an invisible bridge between them. Really? She replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. And when was that? Last Sunday, after catechism class. He gave boats to all the children, but he especially taught me how to fold mine. He said that when he was a boy, his father taught him, and now he was passing the knowledge on. Her son's words hit Emily with unexpected force. Michael was trying in his own way to be a father to Matthew, to transmit something of himself, to create a connection that transcended the abyss that separated them. One Sunday afternoon, while observing father and son, without either of them knowing the true relationship that united them, animatedly discussing constellations after Mass, Emily felt something change within her. The resentment, which for so long she had nurtured as a form of protection, was beginning to give way to a deeper understanding. Michael had erred, yes. He had abandoned her at her most vulnerable moment, chosen his vocation over the love they shared. But now, seeing him interact with Matthew, Emily realized that he too had suffered with his choice. The marks were there, in the prematurely gray, hair in the deep lines around his eyes, in the austerity he had adopted as a second skin. I need to talk to you, she said, approaching Michael after sending Matthew to wait with Sarah. He nodded, without surprise, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. They met in the old parish library, a neutral, safe place but laden with memories for both. It was there, among dusty shelves of theology and philosophy, that they had exchanged confidences and eventually the first forbidden kiss. Matthew likes you very much, Emily began, sitting in a worn wooden chair. He talks about the stories. You tell about the paper boats, about the stars. Michael smiled, a contained but genuine smile. He's an extraordinary boy, intelligent, curious, compassionate. You did an admirable job, Emily. I did what any mother would do. I gave my best. A comfortable silence settled between them, very different from the tension that had marked their last encounter. Michael, I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely forgive what happened, she continued, choosing her words carefully. But I understand that you suffered too, that you still suffer. Every day, he confirmed with a choked voice, every day I think about the choices I made, the mistakes I committed. The letter I sent you was the most cowardly act of my life. There isn't a single day I don't regret it. Why didn't you come back sooner? Why wait 6 years? Michael took a deep breath before answering. Because I didn't think I was worthy. I still don't. I spent those years in penance, isolated, trying to find peace. The bishop thinks I've punished myself enough, that it's time to return to the world, to serve the community again. But the truth is that I carry my prison with me, wherever I go. Emily observed the man before her, no longer the charismatic young priest she had fallen in love with, nor the passionate lover who had promised worlds, but a man matured by pain and regret. What do you want now, Michael? She asked directly. What is your desire regarding Matthew? I just want to be present somehow, not as a father. I know I lost that right, but as someone who cares, who can offer guidance, friendship. I want to see him grow, even if from a distance. Emily considered his words, weighing them against years of maternal protection and justified fears. And if one day he discovers the truth, she questioned, if he notices the resemblance between you, if he does the math and understands that the story of the military man was just that, a story. Then we'll face that together, Michael replied with a conviction that surprised her. I won't run away anymore, Emily. Not this time. If that day comes, I'll be by your side to help Matthew understand. That night, alone in her room, Emily revisited the conversation several times in her mind. She remembered the abandoned mill, the escape plans, the whispered promises. She also remembered the pain of abandonment, the nights of silent crying, the fear of facing the world alone with a child in her arms. But she remembered, above all, Michael's look upon seeing Matthew for the first time in church, without knowing he was his son, a look of instinctive recognition, as if something in his soul responded to an ancestral call. The next morning, she made her decision. Matthew deserved to know his origins, to understand where he came from, even if that meant facing painful truths. Not now, not while he was just a child, but one day, when he was mature enough to understand the complexities of love and human error. Meanwhile, she would allow Michael to be part of their lives, not as a father figure, but as a family friend, a mentor, someone who could enrich Matthew's life with knowledge and wisdom. A week later, during a picnic organized by the parish, Emily observed from afar while Michael taught Matthew and other children to identify different types of clouds in the sky. He seems so happy, commented Sarah, sitting next to her sister. Both Matthew and the priest. There's a connection between them, isn't there? Yes, agreed Emily with a serene smile. There's a connection. You did the right thing, you know, continued Sarah, holding her sister's hand. By letting them get close, by forgiving. I don't know if I've completely forgiven, confessed Emily. But I understood that forgiveness isn't just for the other. It's also for ourselves. Matthew deserves to grow up without the weight of resentment, without secrets that poison the soul. That afternoon, when Matthew ran to her, his eyes shining with excitement as he reported everything he had learned about clouds and weather, Emily felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Life hadn't turned out as she had planned. The love she had found was forbidden, painful, complex, but it had brought with it the greatest gift she could imagine. Her son, her reason for living, her driving force. And now, slowly, that same love was finding a path to redemption. Not as the passionate romance of before, but as something deeper, a mutual understanding, a renewed respect, a chance for healing. As the sun set over Pinecrest Valley, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emily looked at Michael, who was observing Matthew from afar. Their gazes crossed briefly, and in that instant, without words, they sealed a silent pact. They would do their best so that the past would not define the future, so that yesterday's mistakes would not overshadow tomorrow's possibilities. The church bell rang in the distance, announcing the end of the day. Matthew ran to take his mother's hand as they walked home. Behind them, Michael headed to the parish, carrying the weight of his vows and his choices, but also, for the first time in years, a spark of hope. It wasn't a happy ending in the traditional sense. It was something more valuable, a new beginning, a second chance, not for the romantic love they once shared, but for a more encompassing love which included forgiveness, acceptance,